I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's paid family leave webinar for bonding with a newly born, adopted, or fostered child. I'm Adam Rossi from the Communication and Outreach Unit here at the Workers' Compensation Board. Joining me today is Courtney Valley from our Office of General Counsel. And today we will provide an overview of New York's paid family leave benefit, specifically as it pertains to bonding leave. We will be updating you on updates for 2023, as well as some important information regarding COVID-19 resources to help you if you plan on taking paid family leave. We will be using the chat feature to take your questions today. Again, if you look at the bottom right-hand side of your screen, there should be a chat bubble icon. You can click on that, a chat box will pop up, and you can enter your questions right through there. We will be, you can ask questions at any point during the presentation. However, we are going to hold off until the end of the presentation to take your questions. Courtney will answer as many of your questions as she can, but if you have questions that we either don't get to today, or if you think of something after the session ends, we will be providing you with resources at the end of today's presentation. We will also be providing a copy of the slide deck as well as a recorded version of this webinar. It will be posted on our YouTube page and on the Paid Family Leave webinar page. So please make sure you are signed up for email updates so you're notified when those are available. If you are not signed up for email updates, we will be going over how to do that at the end of the presentation today. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So as I mentioned, we are going to be presenting on paid family leave as it pertains to bonding with a newly born, adopted, or fostered child today. And since its implementation in 2018, paid family leave benefits have been significantly enhanced to further improve the lives of working New Yorkers and their families, including providing more time off, more uses for paid family leave, and more financial security. In today's presentation, we'll start by discussing why we need paid family leave, and then cover some of the basics you need to know, including the 3 original uses of paid family leave, an overview of the benefits, how much it costs, who's eligible, and steps you need to take to request paid family leave for bonding with a newly born, adopted, or fostered child. We'll review some frequently asked questions about this type of leave, discuss information regarding paid family leave and COVID-19, point you to some helpful resources, and then leave time at the end for your questions. Again, you can submit your questions at any point today, but we are going to wait until the end of the presentation to answer them. So let's get started. Why do we need paid family leave? For too long, employees have struggled to maintain their jobs when they need to care for a loved one during a specific time of need, whether that's welcoming a new baby, caring for a loved one during a specific time of need, whether that's caring for a family member with a serious health condition, or dealing with the family pressures of a loved one who is deployed abroad on active military service. More recently, employees have been challenged by having to quarantine due to COVID-19, or to care for a minor dependent child who is subject to a mandatory quarantine or order of isolation. Employees in these situations face the stress of losing income when they need to take time off to help their family, and also fear that their job may be gone when the family situation is over. In response to these needs, New York took action. In April of 2016, New York paid family leave, the nation's strongest and most comprehensive paid family leave policy, was signed into law. Paid family leave is employee-funded insurance that helps employees be there for their family when they're most needed. Because of paid family leave, workers across New York no longer have to choose between caring for their loved ones and their jobs, as we now have employee-paid insurance to help in these critical times. Paid family leave provides job-protected paid time off, so you can bond with a newly born, adopted, or foster child, care for a family member with a serious health condition, or assist loved ones when a spouse, domestic partner, child, or parent is called to active military service abroad. Paid family leave also provides paid time off and job protection so you can care for yourself or your minor dependent child when under an order of mandatory quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. The order must be issued by the state of New York, the Department of Health, local board of health, or any government entity duly authorized to issue such order due to COVID-19. We will go into more detail on these uses later in the presentation, as they are a bit different from the others. In addition to paid time off, New York's paid family leave also has strong employee protections. You are guaranteed to return to the same or a comparable job after taking paid family leave. A comparable job is defined as a position with comparable employment benefits, pay, and other terms and conditions of employment. You are guaranteed continuation of health insurance while out on paid family leave, on the same terms as if you had continued to work. If you contribute to the cost of your health insurance, you must continue paying your portion of the premium while on leave. You are also guaranteed protection from discrimination and retaliation. Requesting or taking paid family leave cannot be held against you. So, as mentioned earlier, today we will focus on using paid family leave to bond with a newly born, adopted, or foster child. Paid family leave has been shown to have a number of health benefits for parents and children. New mothers who take paid family leave have fewer postpartum depression symptoms, higher breastfeeding rates, and breastfeed longer. Parents are less stressed and have stronger parent-child bonding. Infants have fewer infections and are generally healthier. Paid family leave provides time off for parents to bond with a new child within the first 12 months of the child's birth, adoption, or foster placement. This includes children born, adopted, or placed in foster care in 2022, as long as the leave is taken and completed within the first 12 months of the placement. Mothers and fathers, including same-sex parents, are all provided the same opportunity to bond with their child. Parents who work for different employers can take paid family leave at the same time to bond with the same child. Parents who work for the same employer can take it at the same time unless their employer prohibits it. In that case, they can take leave separately over the first 12 months following the child's birth, adoption, or foster placement. It is important to note that expectant mothers cannot take paid family leave for their own pregnancy. They can take it after the baby is born because paid family leave is used to care for family members. Now we're going to take a look at the specific benefits available in 2023. Eligible employees are able to take up to 12 weeks of paid family leave at 67% of their average weekly wage, capped at 67% of the New York State average weekly wage. An employee's average weekly wage is based on their last 8 weeks of pay prior to taking paid family leave. For 2023, the New York State average weekly wage is $1,688.19. That means the maximum weekly benefit for 2023 is $1,131.08. This is $62.72 more than the maximum weekly benefit from 2022. It's important to note that employees can take this paid time off all at once or intermittently. However, it must be taken in full day increments. To estimate your wage benefit, you can use the 2023 calculator, which is on the Paid Family Leave website. Paid family leave is fully funded through employee contributions. The contribution rate is reviewed annually and is subject to change by the New York State Department of Financial Services. For 2023, the payroll contribution is 0.455% of an employee's gross wages each pay period. The maximum annual contribution is $399.43. This is $24.28 less than in 2022. Employees earning less than the current New York State average weekly wage of $1,688.19 will contribute less than the annual cap of $399.43, consistent with their actual wages. And to estimate your deductions, there's a payroll deduction calculator on the Paid Family Leave website. So, to summarize the benefit and contribution updates for 2023, the maximum weekly benefit is increasing from $1,068.36 to $1,131.08. Also, as of January 1st of 2023, employers may deduct at the rate of 0.455% of an employee's gross wages each pay period, but capped at an annual maximum of $399.43. And you can find full details on this at the Paid Family Leave website at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/2023. So now that we've covered the types of leave, the benefits and the costs, let's discuss who is covered and eligible for paid family leave. Most employees who work for private employers in New York State are covered under paid family leave. If you work for a public employer, your employer may opt into the program. If you're a public employee represented by a union, you may be covered if paid family leave is collectively bargained. For covered employees, your eligibility for taking paid family leave depends on meeting specific requirements for the amount of time you have worked for your employer. Full-time employees who regularly work 20 or more hours per week are eligible for paid family leave after 26 consecutive weeks of employment with the same employer. Part-time employees who work a regular schedule of fewer than 20 hours per week are eligible after working 175 days, which do not need to be consecutive. Citizenship and/or immigration status is not a factor in employee eligibility. In 2021, Governor Hochul signed an amendment to the workers' compensation law, which expands coverage for domestic workers. Previously, domestic workers were only required to be covered if they worked at least 40 hours per week for their employer. As of January 1st, 2022, domestic workers who are hired directly by a private homeowner and who work 20 or more hours a week for that private homeowner are required to be covered for paid family leave. These workers are eligible once they have been in employment with that employer for 26 consecutive weeks. Also, effective January 1st of 2023, siblings are now included in family members eligible to receive family care under paid family leave. Please check with your employer for details on when this goes into effect for your policy. Paid family leave coverage is not optional for eligible employees. You can waive coverage if you regularly work 20 or more hours per week, but won't be in employment for 26 consecutive weeks, or if you regularly work fewer than 20 hours per week and won't work 175 days in a 52-week period. Seasonal workers are a pretty good example of this since they may work full-time, but for only 3 months out of the year, so they would be eligible to waive coverage. If you meet the criteria for waiving coverage, your employer must provide you with a waiver form, which is also available on the Paid Family Leave website. If you waive coverage, you will not make contributions, and you will not be eligible for paid family leave benefits. Employers should keep a copy of your waiver on file. If your schedule changes, such that you no longer qualify for a waiver, that waiver will automatically be revoked within 8 weeks of the schedule change. You can also voluntarily revoke a waiver at any time. If your waiver is revoked, your employer will begin taking paid family leave contributions and collect any retroactive amounts due. Now we'll be covering how to request paid family leave for bonding with your newly born, adopted, or foster child, as well as how disputes and discrimination issues will be handled. When you're ready to request leave to care for bonding with your newly born, adopted, or foster child, there's 3 basic steps. Step 1 is to notify your employer at least 30 days before the start of your leave if it's foreseeable, or as soon as possible. Step 2 is to complete the request forms. And step 3 is to send all the required forms to the insurance carrier. The insurance carrier must pay or deny your request within 18 calendar days of receiving the completed request or the first day of leave, whichever is later. You must submit your completed request package to your employer's insurance carrier within 30 days after the start of your leave to avoid losing benefits. So now we'll take a look at each of these steps a little more in depth. Step 1, informing your employer. Let your employer know at least 30 days before your leave will start if it's foreseeable. For example, you may be planning to take paid family leave immediately after your adoption or foster placement date, or perhaps you will choose to take it at a later date. You can take it at any time within the first 12 months of your child's adoption or foster placement, but you will need to notify your employer as soon as you know the dates you want to take the leave. If you need to take bonding leave unexpectedly and 30 days notice is not possible, so for example, in a case of a last minute adoption or foster placement, you would need to notify your employer as soon as possible. Step 2 is to complete the required paid family leave request forms. For bonding leave, your request will contain 2 forms. The first one is the request for paid family leave, which is Form PFL1, and that gives your insurance company information about you. The second form, which is the bonding certification or Form PFL2, requires information to confirm that the birth, adoption, or foster placement has occurred or will occur. You can get paid family leave request forms from your employer's insurance carrier, or directly from paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/forms. Let's take a look at the request for paid family leave, which is Form PFL1. Every employee who is requesting paid family leave starts with this form. It asks for basic information about you and the leave you want to take, and also has a section for your employer to complete as well. You will submit this form to your employer's insurance carrier, along with other completed forms for the type of leave you are taking. Form PFL1 has 2 parts. You are responsible for filling out Part A, and your employer is responsible for filling out Part B. The first section of Part A covers your personal information, including your address, your social security number or tax identification number, and your date of birth. You must also state why you are requesting the leave and how it pertains to you. Next, you will indicate if you expect your leave to be a continuous period or intermittent. You may not know all the dates for certain, so you can indicate that they are estimated and update your insurer if a change is needed. Finally, you must provide information about your employment, including your employer's location and phone number, your date of hire, your average gross weekly wage, whether or not you have more than one employer, if you are taking paid family leave from the other employer, and if you are currently receiving workers' compensation lost wage benefits. You then need to sign and date Part A of the form and give it to your employer, who will then complete Part B of the form. Before giving this form to your employer, please make a copy of Form PFL1. Your employer has 3 business days to fill out Part B of Form PFL1 and then return it to you. If your employer does not return the form, you can still proceed with your paid family leave request. Next, you must complete the bonding certification, which is Form PFL2. You will need to provide this information about the child, including their date of birth, whether the child lives with you, and evidence of your relationship to the child. Along with the bonding certification form, you must provide proof of your relationship to the child with a supporting document. The type of supporting documentation you provide along with Form PFL1 and Form PFL2 will differ based on the kind of bonding leave you are requesting. So let's take a look at some of the supporting documentation details for bonding leave. The supporting documents shown on this chart on your screen are listed in order of preference for each situation. You should submit the preferred document to the insurance carrier if it is available. If you're the birth parent, you can submit the following documentation before you have your child: an original copy of a healthcare provider certification or pregnancy. If you're a birth parent, and you can submit the following documentation after you have your child: a copy of the child's birth certificate, if available, or an original copy of a healthcare provider certification of birth. If you're an individual who is not the birth parent, you can submit the following documentation: a copy of the child's birth certificate naming you as the second parent. If this is not available, you can provide a court order of filiation from family court or a voluntary acknowledgement of parentage, both establishing legal parenthood. These may be used when parents are not married. Alternatively, the individual who is not the birth parent can provide the same documents as a birth parent plus a second document verifying the relationship to the birth parent. So, for example, a marriage certificate, a civil union, or evidence of a domestic partnership. If you are a foster parent, you must provide a letter of foster care placement issued by a county or city department of social services or a local voluntary agency. If you aren't named on the placement document, you'll need to provide a copy of the placement document and another document proving your relationship to the parent who is named. So, for example, a marriage certificate. If you're an adoptive parent, you must provide a court document finalizing the adoption or documentation proving the adoption is moving forward, such as a signed statement from an adoption agency that the employee is in the process of adopting a child. And again, if you aren't named on the adoption document, you need to provide a copy of the placement document and then another document proving your relationship to the parent who is named, like, again, a marriage certificate. You are also asked to state the date of foster care or adoption placement, if applicable. Once you've obtained the appropriate documents, you then need to sign and date Form PFL-2. A listing of these documentation options and their descriptions is also on Form PFL-2. Step 3 is to send all the forms to your employer's insurance carrier. You will submit Form PFL-1 and Form PFL-2 to your employer's paid family leave insurance carrier or directly to your employer if they are self-insured. The address can be found in Part B, Question 13 of Form PFL-1. This is the section your employer completed. If the carrier's address is not on the form, ask your employer, or you can contact the Paid Family Leave Helpline at 844-337-6303 for assistance. And we will have that number available to you on a slide later in the presentation. So, if the insurance carrier must then pay or deny within 18 calendar days of receiving your completed request, or the first day of leave, whichever is later. If for some reason your paid family leave request is denied, or you have another claim-related dispute, such as the amount of your benefits or timeliness of a carrier's decision, you may request to have the denial reviewed by a neutral arbitrator. Your insurance carrier, or again, your employer if they're self-insured, will notify you of the reason for the denial and provide you with information about requesting arbitration. Arbitration for paid family leave is handled by National Arbitration and Mediation, also known as NAM. And more information on arbitration is available on NAM's website. You can go to nyspfla.namadr.com. As mentioned earlier, your employer may not discriminate against you for requesting or taking paid family leave, and you are guaranteed job protection with the same or comparable job upon return from paid family leave. If your employer does not return you to your same or a comparable job, terminates you, reduces your pay and or benefits, or disciplines you in any way as a result of you requesting or taking paid family leave, you can file a discrimination claim with the Workers' Compensation Board. An administrative law judge may order an employer to reinstate an employee, pay any lost wages, pay attorney fees, and pay up to $500 in penalties. The process and forms are available at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, or you can call the Paid Family Leave Helpline for assistance. Again, that number is 844-337-6303. There are a few frequently asked questions about paid family leave, as well as other leave policies that may be helpful for you to know. The first, how are paid family leave and FMLA similar? There are several similarities between New York's paid family leave and the Federal Family and Medical Leave Act. Both provide leave for bonding with a child, caring for a family member with a serious health condition, and assisting when a family member is deployed on active military service abroad. You are also guaranteed that you will return to the same or comparable position and that your health insurance will continue on the same terms as if you had continued to work. If you contribute to the cost of your health insurance, you must continue to pay your portion of the premium cost while on leave. However, there are a number of key differences. First off, paid family leave is paid. FMLA is not paid. Almost all private employers will carry PFL insurance. FMLA does not include insurance, and it has a 50 employee threshold for eligibility. The length of time you must work is different. For paid family leave, if you regularly work 20 or more hours a week, you must be in employment for 26 consecutive weeks for that employer. And if you regularly work fewer than 20 hours per week, you must work 175 days for the same employer, which do not need to be consecutive. For FMLA, you must have worked for a full year and 1,250 hours in the last 52 weeks to qualify. The biggest distinction may be that under New York's paid family leave, you are taking leave to care for someone else, not for your own health condition. FMLA does allow you to take leave for your own health condition. Paid family leave is only taken in full day increments. FMLA may be taken hourly. Also, under paid family leave, you do not need to use other paid time off first. Can you take both paid family leave and short-term disability? You cannot collect short-term disability and paid family leave benefits at the same time. However, you can take them one after the other. So a birth parent can, for example, take short-term leave disability if they're qualified, and then take paid family leave. However, it is important to note that the total number of time taken for disability and paid family leave cannot exceed 26 weeks in any 52-week period. There is one exception for this, which we will be going over very shortly. How does paid family leave work with other maternity or paternity leave policies? To be compliant with the paid family leave law, covered employers must have coverage for at least 12 weeks of paid family leave at 67% of an employee's pay up to the statewide cap for 2022. I'm sorry, 2023. Employers are free to supplement paid family leave with additional benefits if they'd like. Employers can add to those benefits up to a maximum of an employee's full wages. The combined benefit from the employer and the paid family leave policy may not exceed the employee's full wages. Employers can require paid family leave to run concurrently with their own maternity and paternity leave policies. So you should check with your employer about how those benefits interact. What if a child being fostered or adopted is not an infant? So there is no age limit on taking paid family leave to bond with a child. Again, just keep in mind that the bonding leave must be taken and completed within the first year of the child's birth, foster, or adoption placement. So, as we had mentioned earlier, there are two additional uses of paid family leave that took effect under emergency legislation signed in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. The legislation allows for a combination of New York paid family leave and disability benefits if you are under an order of mandatory or precautionary quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. I mentioned before that we said you cannot take short-term disability and paid family leave at the same time, only in one instance. This is that instance. So this is the only time you may receive both paid family leave and disability benefits at the same time. This also gives you access to paid family leave if your minor dependent child is under an order of mandatory or precautionary quarantine or isolation due to COVID-19. You may apply for a combination of paid family leave and disability benefits to receive your full pay up to a cap for some or all of the quarantine period. You may be eligible to receive 67% of your pay up to a maximum weekly benefit of $840.70. Disability benefits will then make up the difference in your salary up to a maximum weekly benefit of $2,043.92 for a combined total of $2,884.62 per week. There is no waiting period, and just like paid family leave, you will have job protection throughout the quarantine. Depending on the size of your employer, paid sick leave benefits may also be available and may be used prior to any paid family leave or disability benefits. We do want to note that this does not apply if you work for a public employer or an employer with 100 or more employees, because those employers are required to provide up to 14 days of paid sick leave during a quarantine for COVID-19. If you request leave for your minor dependent child's quarantine or isolation, you may be eligible to receive 67% of your pay up to a maximum weekly benefit of $840.70. More detailed information about taking paid family leave for your quarantine or for your child's can be found at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov/COVID-19. There you'll also find information about New York State's COVID-19 paid sick leave requirements, FAQs, application forms, and more. As you think about how paid family leave may be able to help you and your family, there are resources available to assist you. Complete details on paid family leave are available at paidfamilyleave.ny.gov, along with other resources, including paid family leave request forms and fact sheets, weekly deduction and benefit calculators, updates for 2023, and information about paid family leave quarantine leave benefits. If you're thinking about taking paid family leave soon, you can download the forms now and get started on filling them out. You may also contact the Paid Family Leave Helpline at 844-337-6303 for assistance. If you're not already subscribed for email updates on paid family leave, including information on upcoming webinars, as well as when this presentation will be available for you to review, you can subscribe by clicking Get Paid Family Leave Updates on the bottom of the paidfamilyleave.ny.gov homepage. So this does conclude our presentation. We thank you for the opportunity to discuss paid family leave with you. We will now use the rest of the time to answer any questions you may have. Please keep in mind that the board is unable to provide legal advice, which includes guidance about what you should do in specific situations. If you have specific questions or concerns about a request for paid family leave, you should contact your disability or your paid family leave insurance carrier. They are the entity that makes the decision to either pay or deny the benefits. However, if you have any other questions, feel free to enter them in the chat box. Courtney will take a look at them, and we do have a number of questions that have already come in. So we are going to take a quick break. I'm going to hand everything over to Courtney, and she will be back to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. So I see a few questions here about kind of reimbursement, use of PTO, all over the place. So I'm just going to go over kind of all of reimbursement. Like Adam said, cannot provide legal advice. I'm not going to be able to give you specifics on what you should do in a situation, but generally speaking, like employers cannot force employees to use accruals during a period of paid family leave. So that's the general rule. It's in Section 205 of the Workers' Comp Law. Cannot force employees to use accruals. You can offer them the choice to use accruals if they want, and if they want to receive full wages, they can do that. You can pay full wages to an employee, and if you do pay full wages to an employee, you can request reimbursement from the carrier, and that's handled by the carrier. Another way that you could do it would be to top up an employee's paid family leave benefits. So the carrier is paying that 67% up to the cap. You could allow the employee to use partial accruals to top up is what we call it, but essentially to make up that 33% so that they're making full wages. So employees can't get more than 100% of wages, but you could allow them to top up so that they get 100% of wages. Otherwise, if you pay them full wages, you could request reimbursement, and that's done in accordance with Section 237 of the Workers' Comp Law. And specific questions about reimbursement, you should direct them to the carrier because they are the ones who are actually going to be doing the reimbursement and processing the application. But there's kind of a few ways that you could go. You could just pay the employee's full wages and request reimbursement. You could allow the employee the choice to use accruals or not. And if they choose to use accruals, you can let them top up so that they receive full wages. But specific questions about when you'll be reimbursed, what the reimbursement parameters are, you should direct those to the carrier. Okay, next question here I see is, can PFL be applied retroactively, and if so, for what length? So generally speaking, employees have 30 days from the first day of leave to apply for benefits, or else they risk losing benefits. So say an employee, it's more than 30 days since their first day of leave, and then they apply. There's no reason for the delay, they just apply. The carrier does not have to pay any more than 2 weeks before they receive the completed application. So if it's 35 days, they're going to look back 2 weeks from that 35th day. Otherwise, if it's several months late, the carrier is not required to pay that. It's going to be a denial because it's 30 days deadline. But having said that, if there are extenuating circumstances, the employee can always go to the carrier and say, here's what happened. This is why I was unable to file my application within 30 days. And the carrier does have the discretion to excuse the late filing for a good reason. Okay, next question here I see is, can an employee refuse to apply or use PFL following the birth of the child while they're out on FMLA? So generally speaking, the employer can require an employee to take available FMLA and PFL for the same qualifying event at the same time. So you can actually require them to take them at the same time. And if they don't apply, there is a mechanism for it to count as PFL anyway, assuming you followed the correct procedure. And that's found in section 380-2.5G of the regulations. So that's 380-2.5G. And that has kind of the steps that you need to take. But I do also want to mention, so a lot of employees, if they're the one giving birth, they may want to take disability first, and then, they're taking maybe FMLA for their own health condition to care for themselves, because FMLA allows you to care for yourself. That is not eligible for paid family leave, and therefore PFL and FMLA would not be running concurrently in that instance. So if someone's on disability and FMLA, that's not going to count against them for PFL because that's not for the same qualifying event. If we're talking about they're taking bonding leave for FMLA, and then they also are refusing to apply for PFL after the employer has followed that, so you want to look at the regulation then for that. But the statute does allow the employer to require an employee to take available FMLA and PFL for the same qualifying event at the same time. Okay, next question here is someone who just started working and the employer has started taking deductions from my pay, but I have to wait 26 weeks to apply for the benefit. Is this correct that the employer is able to deduct as soon as I receive my first paycheck, or do they have to wait? So an employer can start taking deductions from the employee's hire. So when the employee is hired, the employer can start taking the deductions. And the reason for that is that you are still included on their PFL insurance policy, so they're going to have to pay for the PFL insurance policy that includes you on the premium, even though you're not able to take PFL for 26 weeks. The deductions aren't directly correlated to eligibility. So they're covered employees that they're taking deductions from, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're eligible at that moment in time. But it's to cover the cost of having you on their PFL insurance policy premium. Okay, next question here is, can I review the difference between maternity and paternity leave? So I'm not quite sure I understand the question, but I'll kind of answer it a couple different ways and hopefully that will cover it. So if we're talking about PFL for bonding, there is no difference. An eligible employee is eligible for up to the 12 weeks of paid family leave, whether it's maternity or paternity leave, any parental leave for bonding. It's within the first, it has to be taken and completed within the first year of the child's life, and it's up to the 12 weeks at the 67%. So if we're talking about PFL, in the statutory paid family leave, there is no difference effectively. It's either parent can take, or both parents, if they're eligible, can take the 12 weeks. If you're asking about the paid parental leave that was announced to you, there's like the governor now, that is a paid parental leave that's completely separate and distinct from paid family leave. So it's not related to paid family leave as we're discussing it here. That's a paid parental leave benefit for state employees. Okay, next question here is wondering if time that an employee is on strike counts as time worked toward the 26 consecutive weeks minimum. So this is not specifically addressed in the PFL law and regulations, and I can't give legal advice, so I'm not going to be able to give you like a definitive yes or no. But generally speaking, if an employee regularly works 20 or more hours per week, the eligibility timeline is 26 consecutive weeks of employment with the covered employer. So time away from work could count toward eligibility. I'm also going to direct you to the regulation that has more information about, what does and doesn't count, but this is not explicitly addressed, but it may give you a little bit more to work with, and that's 380-2.5. So 380-2.5 has kind of a more fleshed out eligibility requirement, but if we're talking about someone who regularly works 20 or more hours per week, the timeline is 26 consecutive weeks of employment. It doesn't necessarily mean weeks worked. So in some instances, time away from work, like a vacation or something like that, could count toward eligibility, but whether or not an employee on strike counts may depend on if they're still in employment, or may depend on, some other fact-specific things. So I'm not going to be able to say yes or no. Okay, next question here is, if an employee is taking intermittent PFL and then goes through a layoff, can he or she still take PFL after the layoff? So again, can't provide legal advice including eligibility determinations, but PFL is a benefit for employees in employment in New York State. So if the employee is taking intermittent PFL and then between days of leave, they are laid off and their employment is terminated, they're no longer eligible for PFL. So eligibility for PFL ends when employment ends. Okay, next question here is, if the employee is on PFL, either intermittent or concurrent, and they decide not to return back to work, can the employer take any action? So an employee is not required to return to work after a period of PFL in order to get benefits. So it doesn't affect their eligibility for PFL. I can't provide legal advice, so I can't tell you what you can do, but if it's after an agreed upon the employee is saying, I'm taking 8 weeks of PFL, or they took the full 12 weeks of PFL and then they don't return to work, time away from work that is not PFL is subject to the employer's normal leave policies. So that's outside the purview of the PFL law and regulations. So if an employee takes all 12 weeks of PFL and then they still don't return to work, they're no longer on PFL, and then it's going to be subject to the employer's normal leave policies. You do want to keep in mind that you can't discriminate or retaliate against an employee because they take PFL, but time away from work that isn't PFL is outside of the PFL law and regulations, and it's going to be subject to the normal leave policies. Okay, next question here is asking what happens if the carrier does not approve or deny within the 18 days? And what if someone on intermittent leave doesn't get paid in a timely manner? So, carriers have 18 days from the first day of leave or receipt of a completed request, whichever is later, to pay or deny the request for PFL. Um, when it's intermittent leave, it's a little bit different because the insurance carrier can require the employee to say, hey, I'm taking this day every time, but they still have to pay in a timely manner. If they don't pay in a timely manner, all PFL claim-related disputes are subject to arbitration, including untimely payment of benefits, a dispute over the benefit amount, any just disagreement on the decision in general. Any PFL claim-related dispute is subject to arbitration. So if they wait beyond the 18 days and it's they've received the completed request and it's still, no decision has been made and it's untimely and the payment is untimely or any combination of those, the employee can go to arbitration and it can be decided by a neutral arbitrator. And the arbitrator for PFL is NAM, so it's a National Arbitration and Mediation, which we talked about earlier. And there's a website that you can go to and you can request arbitration to have the matter looked at by an arbitrator and decided, and it'll be a neutral arbitrator.
All right, thanks, Courtney. That's all the questions I see. So Courtney and I will hang on for a little longer. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat box. In the meantime, I do want to remind you, we will be providing you with a copy of this slide deck as well as a recorded version. They will both be available on the Paid Family Leave website under the webinar section. In the meantime, if you would like to review some materials, or if you have any questions, or if you need a refresher for anything, we do have other previously recorded paid family leave webinars on that page, as well as our YouTube page. If you go to the Workers' Compensation Board, or I'm sorry, if you go to youtube.com and you type in New York State Workers' Compensation Board into the search bar, you should find our page and you'll find dozens upon dozens of paid family leave webinars and presentations as it pertains to specific leave types or just general webinars for employees, general webinars for employers. So we have numerous recordings that can hopefully help you out while you wait for this recording and this presentation to be edited and posted on the website. And again, we will be emailing everybody when those are available, so make sure you are signed up for email updates. If you're not, you can find out how to do so right there on your screen. All right, I do not see any other questions that have come in, so we're going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank Courtney for taking the time to answer your questions, and I want to thank all of you for taking the time to be present today and for your participation as well. We always appreciate it. We do want to remind you, you can sign up to subscribe for paid family leave updates, and you can do so by visiting the Paid Family Leave website. Scroll down to the bottom of the homepage and select Get Paid Family Leave Updates. And by subscribing, you will also receive updates on future webinars. We do also distribute information via social media, so please be sure to follow the Workers' Compensation Board on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, as well as YouTube, as I just mentioned. Lastly, before we sign off today, I want to let you know you will be directed to take a brief survey before you close out of your browser. Your responses to these help us improve future webinars, so we greatly appreciate you taking a couple minutes to fill that out. Again, I want to thank you all for joining us. Thank you again to Courtney, and please enjoy the rest of your afternoon. And